Good morning, good lunchtime, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome to sunny Edinburgh. I'm Martin McKenna, and
I'm Fulton Henry.
you got the cue. People may have noticed that I have substituted my usual streaming hosting partner with Fulgence today, and that is because Neil has decided to upgrade himself to being a presenter today, and we're going to make him do lots of work, and myself and Fulgence, we get to ask lots of questions.
I see that Neil has acquired some superpowers as well, right?
He has. We've got the whole superpower theme going on, and we have got two superheroes joining us, flying away. And I think we should probably we'll bring them on in a second. But anybody watching, if you're watching on a channel other than Zoom, Neil has got a special super button that he'll be pressing in a moment to put the Zoom link into YouTube and various other locations. If you want to come and join us on Zoom, then please do so for the full experience, because you're going to be able to interact and add a few comments in that will appear on our Streamer Live video graphics. So we're going to be doing a little bit of that. So please do that, and please drop into the Zoom call where you are calling from and what you're hoping to learn today. Just put that into the chat, and we will see it regardless of what platform that you put it in. But if you put it in on the Zoom chat, even better. If you join us on Zoom, you don't have to turn your camera on. Don't worry about that if it's early in the morning, like it is for Fulgence and indeed our other guests.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, super early. At lunchtime for us, no doubt evening if you're in Thailand or somewhere. But let's go on. Let's bring in our wonderful guests and the people who are going to do the hard work. If I press the right button.
I'm going to do my best superhero pose now, right? Isn't that like a Superman pose?
Yeah.
Working.
Hands on the hip.
I think I've just
Oh,
just
sorry.
pulled my back out.
See, Neil's a much better superhero than I am.
The hips won't take it.
He's got that the prosthetic leg he's got there for it, and the hip replacement. That's superheroes.
Advil is a
courtesy.
superhero's best friend. Yes.
Yes, courtesy of
Not
the
that old yet,
NHS, the National Health Service over here. There's a point in life when none of us are human anymore. I think that's the choice.
Exactly.
So for those of you who don't know me, I'll do a quick intro. We'll do a quick round the house intro. So I'm Martin McKenna. I am in sunny Edinburgh, where people are outside chopping up trees with chainsaws. You couldn't have timed it better for a live stream if you tried. So if I mute myself and then forget to unmute myself, it's because the chainsaw gang are outside. But I do a little bit of live streaming once a month on this show and every week with Neil. And I do love a bit of eCam design work and things like that. So all the stuff you're seeing around us today, I've been playing about with various AI tools and eCam design work to get this all together and looking good. But down here, we also have another eCam design expert. Introduce yourself. Fulgence.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Fulgence Henry, live video producer and remote video producer. I do some eCam design work as well. You may have seen me on some shows in the eCam Live YouTube channel, eCam Live community, and I'm located upstate New York, but currently I'm here in what I call the dungeon Airbnb. It's like 110 degrees plus here, and if you hear some weird noises, that's why. So welcome.
Chris, you're up.
My name is Chris Stone. I'm at castahead.net, and we produce powerful podcasts for entrepreneurs who don't want to know how the sausage is made. We create the sausage for them, and we produce a bunch of shows for a bunch of clients. We'll talk about that as we go forward. I'm also the co-host of a show called Dealcasters, where we go live in a bunch of different places, including Amazon, biggest mall in the world, and talk about solving people's problems in the world of audio and video and podcasting and live streaming and virtual presentations, kind of like this thing right here.
And my name is Neil Farrimond. I'm based in sunny Portugal, and it's hot today as well. It's around 95 degrees Fahrenheit, so I've got the AC cracked on here. I do live streaming, remote production, bits and pieces like that. Also, I'm an Ecamm moderator, OBSBot ambassador, and I've done some work for Ecamm in the past. And I have a weekly live stream with my co-host here, Martin. And today, as he said, I've been relegated to doing presentation, which is great because I don't have to press tons of buttons, only streamed at pedals. So it's great to be here.
So we have a few people joining us already, which is great. So the more the merrier. So let's just add a few things from the broadcast. Joining us all the way from Vietnam. I told you it was good morning, good evening, good lunchtime. So good evening for you.
Outstanding.
Thank you. And let's see who else is joining us. Oh, thank you. We're legends, but you are
Eden.
The
We know
legend
you're a legend
herself.
too.
Yes.
And Jim,
Look
of
at
course,
this
from Matt
guy.
Stowell.
We even got Jim Fuse up this morning. Look at that.
I missed the memo. I missed the memo, Jim.
That's true. Totally unplanned. I just now noticed that.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have a friend of the show joining us all the way from sunny Glasgow. Well, it's
Hey,
probably
John.
not sunny. It's probably not sunny in Glasgow. Hey, John, how you doing? So this is how it works. We can bring in your comments at any time, people who haven't seen this type of thing before. And we're going to be doing that throughout the show, but not continuously. So we will have little pause or interludes where we will bring up this particular screen and we will look at your comments and take those through, because Chris is going to do us roughly half an hour of presenting, and also Neil is going to do roughly half an hour of presenting, and of course we'll have some little bits and pieces between here as well. So I notice Mike here from Toronto as well, so thank you for joining us, Mike. Chris has got a question for you before he leaps into his particular element of the show, and it is: what is the number one factor that separates amateur video from professional content? Now, depending on how many people we've actually got in the Zoom room, you can type in 1, 2, 3 or 4 in the Zoom chat, and I think my guests can do that for me as well, while Chris is going to read out the options for that. 1, 2, 3 or 5 in the Zoom chat, please, people.
All right. Option number one that separates amateur video from pro content is crystal clear 4K video quality. Number two is a $500 studio audio setup. Number three is smart location choice. Number four is proper mic technique. Or number five, looking as good as Fulgens Henry right here on the screen. What is the number one factor that separates amateur video from professional content? 1 through 5.
Got like 75% over here.
Everybody thinks it's
We
just
know who
looking
the
like
popular
full.
superhero. We know who the real superhero is, right? It's a popularity contest. It's like it's not even fair.
Got a clear winner, I think.
So, yeah. Folks,
thank you.
We have a clear winner. We have a clear winner. It's just looking as good as Fulgens. That's all you need to do. However, this is a great part of
I'm
the
available
show.
for consultations. Yeah, fulgensh@gmail.com. You can contact me there. Or send me a message via LinkedIn. I'll be happy to connect.
Yeah.
Again, unplanned. Fulgens had no idea that was coming. But I just threw him a nice little softball.
That's all right. You've
thank you.
got no
Appreciate
idea
it.
what's coming next either. So, right. And this is the way we roll it, guys. I don't actually show people what's going to happen in the show before the show. We do a little bit of tech check beforehand and make sure our microphones are all working and we're plugged into the right audio sources, hopefully. But Chris is going to tell us a lot more about microphones and audio sources. But before he does, let's maybe just tell people just randomly what microphones we are using, because we like to geek out. So I have got a Shure SM7B Fulgens.
I'm currently on the Shure MV7X.
Oh,
Neil?
it's me. I'm on the
That's you.
Electro Voice RE20.
He has to do something
And I'm
different,
the-
doesn't he? Right?
Well, you know, he is the podcast king. And I'm using the Shure SM7B going into my Rodecaster.
Okay, that's a microphone top 10 or top 4 for you guys, but let's have a little bit more about that because it's now time for us to say, take it away, Chris.
Outstanding. Thank you for that. Just great graphics and beautiful people of planet Earth. Welcome to the Audio Advantage, why smart creators prioritize sound over sight. I'm Chris Stone from Cast Ahead, and I'm absolutely pumped to be here with Neil, Fulgens, and Martin for this session today to talk about my absolute favorite thing in the world when it comes to video podcasting. No, it's not video. It's your audio. So before we dive in, I want to hit you with the brutal truth. If you don't know this already, this should change how you think about every piece of content that you create. Your audience decides your credibility in 7 seconds. 80% of that decision is based on what they hear, not what they see. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story as it relates to this. It just happened like 3 weeks ago. And I have a client who happens to be like a major mattress and home furnishings company. And they invited me to be on a Zoom call. Actually, I was just observing. I was watching a consultant who charges like 5 figures a year for marketing and social media. The guy was brilliant, absolutely amazing. Presentation was polished. Slides were absolutely gorgeous. 4K video. Well, it wasn't exactly 4K video. It was on Zoom, but it looked just amazing. And he knew his stuff inside and out. But within the first 30 seconds, I watched my client and their potential clients face change. And then if you've ever been on a Zoom call where somebody hits you up on the side, little side chat directly, right? My client hits me upside directly and says, "What's the deal with his sound?" And it wasn't because of what he was saying, but because his laptop microphone that he was speaking into made him sound like he was broadcasting from a submarine. It was also somehow stuck in a tin can. Of course I heard it. I deal with audio like this every single day, but my client couldn't get past how annoying this person's audio was on this pitch. You see, the client's brain immediately categorized him as unprofessional before he even finished the intro. The deal was dead, and this guy had no idea why. Now, put this in the chat if this has ever happened to you. Type submarine if you've ever been on a call where someone sounded like they were underwater. Go ahead, just hit submarine if you've ever been on a call where someone sounded like they were underwater. Or if you're feeling a little guilty right now, type guilty if you think maybe your own audio might be sabotaging you. So I've been there as well. I've absolutely been there as well. My question to you is this: how many opportunities might you be losing because your audio is sabotaging your authority? You're focusing too much on how you look, not how you sound. It's sabotaging your ability to deliver your message or accomplish the goals you've worked so hard to achieve, even before you've gotten started. All right, a little quick introduction. That's me on a submarine. A little quick introduction. I'm Chris Stone. I'm the founder of Cast Ahead, and we're a podcast production agency. And over the past 6 years, I've helped everyone from Fortune 500 executives to independent business owners transform their voice into the most powerful business asset through the power of podcasting. And here's what I've been up to. I've produced over 1,500 podcast episodes. I've reviewed and tested hundreds of microphones and audio interfaces. I built some regional podcasts like Lancaster Connects into local mattress store podcasts that transform them into a regional authority that's 10x their business connections. I've helped clients go from sounding like they're taking your order at a fast food drive-thru to having a commanding presence that people actually want to listen to. But here's what really matters to you. I've made all of these mistakes. I've made every single audio mistake possible, and I still watch others make them every single week. So you don't have to. I've been the guy who sounded terrible. I've been the guy who's lost opportunities because I've had just crap audio. I spent way too much money on equipment that didn't fix the real problems. So here's what we're going to cover in the next 25 or so minutes. This is the roadmap. We're going to talk about why audio is something you should focus on first, the physics as it relates to all this kind of stuff, some smart equipment choices for you that it's going to get you some pro results without breaking the bank, some setup strategies that you can use, whether you're a solo podcaster or just doing a virtual presentation yourself on Zoom calls as an executive or to multi-person productions. and then some workflow stuff that, some tools that can save you some time and elevate your quality, and some things you might not be thinking of. So if you're ready to go, hit me in the chat with a YEP. A YEP. Now, I'm not going to tell you to spell it Y-E-P or Y-U-P, but I will tell you, those who choose to spell it Y-U-P, you must also say GIF instead of GIF. So that I'm just saying. So hit me with a YEP if we're ready to dive in. We're getting some yips, and Fulgens can't even spell. I don't know. I mean, that is like, I've never seen that. And apparently GIF is like peanut butter, according to Neil. So here we go. This is the harsh reality, folks. Nobody talks about this. People will tolerate bad video, but they will not tolerate bad audio. This is not just my opinion, it's actual science. It's proven that poor audio quality severely disrupts the viewing experience. We're talking abrupt changes in volume, inaudible dialogue, low quality soundtracks that make a video less immersive. It gets viewers to disengage, and once they hear that, they can't unhear it, and they're gone. So this is a scientific report that videos are generally considered more engaging than audiobooks by 15%. However, physiological responses were stronger for audio, indicating that while video content's more engaging, audio elicits stronger emotional and cognitive responses. And what does that all mean? Your brain's literally wired to extract the meaning from sound. And when that's compromised, the cognitive load of your brain increases. And when that happens, your engagement goes down. So you think of it as your brain is like a computer, and it's trying to run too many apps at once. And when you add this app of bad audio distractions and it's trying to figure that kind of stuff out, it starts to slow down or might even crash. How many of you have been watching a YouTube video, and the moment the audio got weird, you clicked away? If that's you, hit gone. Hit gone. And Neil says yes. If you're a goner, it's immediately like, I can't handle this audio. I don't know what this clicking noise is. I don't know why they sound like they're in an echo chamber. I have to get out of here. I don't care what they're saying. But here's where it gets really interesting for us. I'm going to tell you what's happening in every single person's setup. Every single person has this issue, and it's including myself. But I'm going to show you what this looks like on my screen right here. And here we go. So here's our podcaster, and I'm going to show you exactly what's happening here. So here's our podcaster. We're going to give our podcaster some really cool hair like Neil Farrimond. Okay, here, we give him some cool hair. And, Neil's a happy guy. So here's our happy podcaster. And so what's happening here is, let me just give you a quick demo here of mic technique. This is bad mic technique. So this drawing, thanks to our friend ChatGPT, is a little wrong. So this is bad mic technique. Okay, your mic needs to be, and I'm gonna do this really quickly, about 3 fingers away from your mouth. Okay, generally about 3 fingers away from your mouth. You need to be speaking across the top of your microphone, not directly into the top of your microphone. Now, for some of you, you might think, oh, of course, right? This is just sort of a simple thing, but we're seeing this more and more on YouTube, and a lot of great podcasters, you'll see them practically eating a mic, and it's like right in dead center, right in front of there. But when you say words like podcast, or words like that start with the letter T, that extra air that comes out, it's called a plosive, because it goes right directly into the diaphragm of the mic, and it bounces into it and creates this distortion. It creates a clip, and you cannot fix that. Unless you've got 32-bit float audio, which 99.7% of people don't. It's not something you can fix. So the best bet is to have this, and this is all very intentional, is to have this microphone, within 3 fingers length of your mouth, speaking across the top of the microphone. That's what great mic technique looks like. And so this is not good. This is not. So let's just pretend that this microphone is as close to the mouth as it should be. So we're going to pretend that that's happening. Now, as our happy podcaster is speaking, his or her voice is going out this way. Now, if you have untreated walls, you have an untreated ceiling, You don't have carpeting on the floor. What's happening is your voice is bouncing back. Your voice is bouncing back off of these walls, and it's going back into the area where your microphone is. And so that is just an awful looking graphic, but so we're going to erase that really quickly. What you want to focus on is having a dynamic microphone with a cardioid pickup pattern. So here's our microphone right here. And when you have a cardioid pickup pattern, the microphone is designed to pick up sound that is in this area right here. If you have an omnidirectional microphone, it is built to pick up sound that is everywhere. Guess what's in your laptop microphone? Or in your guess what microphone is in your laptop? An omnidirectional microphone. An omnidirectional condenser microphone. So your laptop microphone is 100% the worst microphone you could possibly use to be on a podcast, to do a virtual presentation. And a lot of people say, well, hey, that works for me. That I'm on a Zoom call and people can hear me. Trust me, they're too nice to tell you that you sound like you're taking an order in a drive-through. So I'm going to give you some ways to kind of fix that, some affordable ways for you to do that. You do not have to spend a ton of money to do this. You don't have to buy a microphone like I've got and some of these other folks that are on this call have. One other thing I'm going to make mention here is that this microphone that's in this picture has a mic stand. Here's why we avoid mic stands. We're on a desk, right? This desk has things like keyboards, mouse, stream decks, you tapping, all kinds of things. And this creates what? It creates vibrations. Vibrations are sound. Sound goes into your microphone. You do not want to use a mic stand. What you want to use instead is what is also connected to this microphone. Thanks again, ChatGPT. Almost got it right. Is this, which is your boom arm. You get it off into a boom arm, and you can see right here, I've got a boom arm that connects to a shock mount. And what a shock mount does is when you do this and you vibrate, you cannot hear anything. The shock mount keeps any vibrations from going into the mic that I'm speaking into. All right. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense to you, I do believe we have some Q&A that we're going to talk through, that we can certainly do that and cover off anything that I wasn't able to cover off. All right. So now that we're through with that, and I still have this lovely boom arm graphic on here, we're going to take that off. Again, laptop mic. Stay away from it. Has a ridiculously marginal signal-to-noise ratio, meaning it's going to get more noise in there than you want. The pickup pattern's omnidirectional. And, of course, the physical limitations. You can't get that microphone close to your mouth. A microphone is not designed, folks, to reach out and grab your voice. It's not meant to do that. So you have to give it the best possibility to reach your voice, and that's the way to do it, is to grab a dynamic microphone with a cardioid pickup pattern. All right, so this is another question that we get a lot when we talk about microphones, is dynamic versus condenser microphones. Here's why almost always, I would say, 90% of the time, I'm going to suggest someone get a dynamic mic versus a condenser mic. Dynamic microphones are less sensitive, and that sounds like it's a bad thing, but actually it's amazing. They pick up less room noise and reflections. They also have larger diaphragms. This gives you that better low frequency response. That gives you just that sexy voice like Fulgens Henry. It translates to warmth and authority in your voice. This is about you maintaining your authority so that whatever you're speaking about has the credibility it deserves. They also have a cardioid pickup pattern, which we talked about. It's focused with natural background rejection. So it's not going to give you that reflection stuff. And of course, it's the proximity is the closer you get to it, your voice actually sounds richer as you get closer to the microphone. Now, condensers, they get all the marketing love. I mean, how many times have you seen that Blue Yeti sitting on someone's desk? If I see a Blue Yeti sitting on someone's desk one more time, pointing in the wrong direction, I'm probably going to go insane. But that's side talk there. The fact of the matter is condensers, they get all the love, but they're too sensitive. They pick up every keyboard click, every fan noise, every room reflection. They really require a perfect acoustic environment. And let's be honest, most of us don't have that. You're not recording in a professional studio. Most of us are recording maybe at home or in an office or something like that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some affordable ways for you to do that. But it also requires phantom power, which is not a huge deal, but you do need an interface, and you've got to turn on phantom power. You got to remember that's a thing. So we don't really recommend doing condenser microphones for podcasting at all unless you have some great treatment. All right. So let's talk about what's free. Who doesn't love free, right? And so we want to talk about why this is showing up on the screen. There we go. We want to talk about some free techniques. So before you spend a single dollar on equipment that we're going to talk about, let me give you the techniques that will transform your audio for absolutely free. We talked a little bit about this, but your room selection. So for those of you who were answering the question at the very beginning, the answer was 3 or C, which is it's better to be in a room, a proper room. As much as everyone loves, it's better to look as good as Fulgens Henry. The correct answer is make sure that you select the right room. So that means small space. That means you want lower ceilings, right? You want fluffy stuff around you. Now, here's the thing that most people don't understand. Well, hey, Chris, this is about video podcasting, and look at you, like you've got something that looks, amazing. You got screens. Da, da, da. Trust me, folks. I don't have a camera that's going to show you the stuff outside of this frame, but everything outside of I got fluffy stuff everywhere. I've got carpeting on the floor. You see this wall right here? It's got some really affordable sound treatment that I've used to just block any reflection that comes off of that wall. I've got sound treatment that's above me. These are all things that are affordable for you to do, and it's just fluffy stuff. Don't Google studio sound treatment, because you're going to be spending thousands of dollars. This is not what we want to do, nor is it really required unless you've got people coming into your studio and you're selling it and all kinds of stuff like that. You don't need to do that. There are affordable ways for you to do that. I've gone to Amazon at times and bought sound insulation, sound treatment insulation. And then I've gone to my local hardware store and bought that. But then I've ordered on Amazon some canvas prints that are, that have wood frames. I've got actually one over there. I'm going to go run and grab it for Q&A. But they've got wood frames and they're canvas prints, and you can print them with your favorite album covers, your logos, all of that kind of stuff, and fill it with insulation and then cover it with some fabric. Those are great to put over your head or put behind you, and they're still functional in terms of branding and things like that. Closets. So if you don't have if you don't have you don't have to worry about, you being in a video, go into your closet. You've got clothes hanging. Hanging clothes are like amazing for sound treatment. And I've recorded some of my best content in closets. And no, that's not a metaphor for, anything. It's actually closets with clothes in them. And then, of course, we talked about mic technique. I'm not going to repeat any of that kind of stuff. You stay consistent with that. And make sure you're testing through this stuff. Record yourself. Listen back to yourself. Be critical about the sound and just dial it in properly, and then you'll be able to set it and forget it. All right, so that is the $0 audio upgrade. So like I said, before you spend $1 on this stuff, listen, a $50 microphone with proper technique in a good room will absolutely destroy a $500 microphone used incorrectly in a bad space. I've heard it before. People have SM7Bs, and I'm like, why does it sound like hot garbage? Because they are not in the right type of room. All right, so let's talk about, this is my favorite part of the show. This is where I get to demonstrate. This is almost like we're having a little impromptu Dealcasters episode. Here is the dynamic microphone lineup that I recommend. Now, you've seen this link that I've got that's been showing this. So for you that are watching this, I've got a special thing. So you don't have to some of you may be madly writing down notes, or I want this microphone, or he talked about this, that, and the other. Don't worry about this. I've got my entire tech stack. So it's everything from software to hardware, everything that I use, including for video. You can go and get it at castahead.net/CLP. I also, as a part of this, will give you my repurposing workflow. So I do a ton of repurposing. So, clips, reels, shorts, blog posts, audio podcasts, everything that I do for my clients. I've got my entire workflow. So it's free for you to download. Just give me your email address. I promise I won't spam you. That's the link right there, and you can get all of this stuff. So you can kind of lean back and enjoy me showing off some microphones and kind of talking through some of these things. The first one I'm going to show you is what I would consider the best starter microphone on the planet. I've been recommending this thing for 7 years, and I have 5 of them. And the reason why I have 5 of them, and I think only 2 of them are here, is because I ship them around to people. They're tanks, and they're affordable. And it's a Samson Q2U. Right now, I think it's like $70, but I've gotten them at times for like $45 because they go on sale at times from Amazon and Sweetwater and such. But the reason why I like it so much is it sounds great, but it's also both a USB and an XLR microphone. So what that means is you can plug it directly into your computer with a USB input, but you can also plug it into an interface with a mic cable, and that is what's considered XLR. So when I say XLR, that means your traditional microphone cable, and this is a USB output. So I can plug it directly into my computer. So if you're just starting out, you don't have an interface, you want to do solo, this will improve your sound on a Zoom call like hundreds of percentiles, and it's $70. It's absolutely great. The only thing I would recommend is for you to get a pop filter for it. I think I've got one. Yeah, here we go. Looks like this. It's going to keep. This will keep you from, it'll keep you from the plosives, like when you say podcast on there. And of course, using proper mic technique. Does it look as cool as the other microphones? Maybe not, but that's okay. And, again, that's the Samson Q2U. Love that microphone. The next microphone that I would consider like maybe the second best, but is what I consider a reliable workhorse. That's the Audio-Technica 2100. I don't have that right now in front of me, but that is an absolutely great mic as well. And then the Shure MV7 Plus, which I'm not sure. I think one of you guys talked about having that microphone. Oh, no, Fulgens, you said you had the MV7X, which is a great microphone. So this Shure MV7 Plus is what I consider the best USB microphone out there right now. And a couple reasons why. It allows you, and the other thing is when you do get a USB mic, I love the fact that it has an XLR as well. So if you do expand your audio lineup, like maybe you're like, oh, I'm now going to be doing a podcast with another person, so I need to get another mic, so I need to get an interface. And this allows you to expand it. Okay, I'm going from just solo creator plugged in with USB. Now I'm going to take it and I'm going to use it with an interface in another room. It allows you to, okay, now I don't have to, just a USB mic. It really just has one function. It's just a solo creator locally. Unless you were to get an interface like this, which is the PodTrack P2, which is the only interface, as far as I know at this point, which allows you to record multiple USB mics at the same time. That's the PodTrack P2. We won't get into this too much. This can be used as an interface with multiple USB mics, as well as recording locally with an SD card. Man, I feel like I'm on Amazon. This is like, I'm feeling right at home with everyone. All right. That's our mics all over the place here. All right. So that's our our XLRs. So let's talk, or I'm sorry, our USB XLRs. Now I'm going to talk about our XLR microphones. And the first one I'm going to talk about, believe it or not, and I think some people are seeing that on the list and are going, what? A Shure SM58? Yeah. I love this mic so much. And I think a lot of people get shocked when, of course, you've seen this mic. I mean, if you haven't seen this mic, I don't know what rock you've been living under. This is absolutely the most popular mic on the planet. You see comedians, politicians, a ton of people that are on stages. You see them use a Shure SM58. This is a great podcasting mic, ladies and gentlemen. It's great. It's got fantastic rear rejection. It's a dynamic microphone. It is XLR only, right? So if you are going to be using a microphone like this, you have to realize like it has to go through an interface. And so we'll talk about interfaces in a few minutes. But one of my favorite interfaces that I'm going to talk about and that works really well with the Shure SM58 is this. This is an actual interface. So if you're looking for a minimalist setup, something that does that, and you want an XLR mic that sounds really, really, really good, this is a Shure MVX2U. It's an actual interface. So you can actually plug it into your microphone directly if you want to, come out of the USB into your computer, monitor locally with a headphone out, and you've got a great sounding podcast mic. This right here that I'm showing you is $200, super versatile, and you don't need a Rodecaster Pro unless you're running a radio station. Okay, so this is a great mic. A lot of people I've talked to already had this mic, right? And I just was like, go put a pop filter on it, and you got a podcast mic. This is a great mic. It's great for if you're a vocalist. Super multifaceted microphone, and it's only $100. All right, so we're gonna tier up a little bit, and I'm gonna show you, in my opinion, an underrated podcast mic. This is the Heil PR40. Heil PR40 goes for about $320. So this is a mic that a lot of people give the Shure SM7B a lot of love, as for good reason. The Heil PR40, outstanding microphone. And so some people prefer their voice on this microphone. It's a little bit more upper mid range because they feel like an SM7B is too boomy, right? It's got too much low end and they don't like that. They want something a little crispier. The Heil PR40 is an outstanding microphone. And then of course, a few of the gentlemen have this microphone that are on today's webinar. This is the Shure SM7B. Now, I will say for this microphone and the next microphone that I'm speaking into, which is the Electro Voice RE20, they are what are considered gain-hungry microphones. So, and that is like if you just plug in your Shure SM7B or you just plug in your Electro Voice RE20, it's going to be quiet as compared to other microphones. And you're not going to understand why. Like, why is this great microphone sound so quiet? And so what you end up doing is you end up cranking up all of the gain in your interface. And when you do that, that brings your preamps, puts stress on the preamps in your interface, and it introduces more noise into your system. And so what we recommend that a lot of people do is get a gain lifter. And that is, a lot of people have seen this. It's a cloud lifter. This is the Cloud Lifter X. What I have on this microphone that I'm speaking into right now is a Cloud Lifter CL1. Again, all of this stuff is on the download, which is at castahead.net/CLP. This is a Cloud Lifter X, but I'm just showing you this. It's just another option. It's a different sort of transformer-based gain lifter. But what this does is it adds 24 decibels of clean gain into any dynamic microphone. So not just your Shure SM7B, which really almost requires it in order for you to sound really good with it. But I've used it on SM58s. I use it on my Heil PR40. I'm using it right now on the Electro Voice RE20, but it almost requires it for both the Shure SM7B as well as the RE20. All right. I'm running out of time, and I knew I would because I love talking about this stuff, but I want to make sure that we cover off a few other things. We talked about the interface. Again, you don't need a Rodecaster Pro unless you're running a radio station. I have one, but I need multiple faceted things, and I'm pulling in. I'm doing a lot of stuff, but we talked about the MVX2U. Another, Focusrite solos and Focusrite 2i2s. If you need two inputs, like maybe you're a guitar and vocalist, or maybe you have a two-person podcast locally, the 2i2 is another. They have great preamps in them. We recommend that as well. And we talked about the Cloudlifter CL1. Headphones. Now, I'm going to refer you to Neil's post on Substack, because he did a fantastic article on Substack regarding this. So we'll cover this really quickly. A lot of people realize, why is everybody wearing headphones? There's two reasons. Number one, there's more than two reasons, but you don't want the audio that's coming from the broadcast, the Zoom call or whatever, to be coming out of speakers, because it'll go right back into the microphone. And that creates that slapback or delay or feedback that makes things echo on these broadcasts. And the other reason is you want to be able to self-monitor. So right now I have in-ear monitors, and I can hear my own voice. It takes a little getting used to. So if you haven't done that, yet, you might want to practice listening to your own voice when you do that. But I can hear myself, and if I'm eating the microphone and it's popping into a diaphragm or something like that, I can hear that. I can back up from the mic. You want to be able to do that. So that's another reason why you want to have those headphone monitors. So there you go. That's the Solo Creator. You don't need anything else other than your dynamic mic, a boom arm. Get that off of your desk. Your headphones, have some closed back headphones. Like people are sometimes okay with the cans. And the reason why they have the cans that go over your ears is because, keep the sound in your head, not going back into your microphone. And then, of course, make sure that you're in a small room. If you're doing multi-person productions, especially if you're doing remote, this is incredibly important. If you remember anything from this, please remember this, because a lot of people, when they launch a podcast, they just go live on YouTube or something, and then they don't realize they're missing out on so much by not taking that content that you've recorded, taking the audio from that content, doing some sort of editing or mixing to make sure that it's commensurate with other audio podcasts, and delivering that audio podcast to the world. Like, I realize YouTube is big; they're huge in podcasting, and it's a huge thing. But I think a lot of people miss this. Is find yourself a great podcast host. I recommend Captivate for what we do. Most of our podcasts are on Captivate. A lot of my clients use, Buzzsprout and Blueberry and Podbean. There's a bunch of them. They all relatively do the same thing, and it's like $20 a month on average. They'll host your audio file and they'll distribute it to the world. And it's really important that when you do your recordings, in this case it's Ecamm. Other people use Riverside, StreamYard, or all these options. When you do your recording, make sure you record separate audio tracks. Here's the reason why. If we were to take, for example, this particular webinar, there's 4 of us that are on this webinar. If Neil had a coughing fit in the middle of me talking, and you just got the one audio file, you're going to get Neil's coughing fit. And so if you have a separate audio track, you're pulling it into your digital audio workstation, which are free if you want to use Audacity, or a lot of computers like on a Mac has GarageBand. A lot of them there's free software for you to edit these things. You can just pull in that file, you find the section where Neil had his coughing fit, and you can pull that down or snip that out so it doesn't cover up your voice. So it's important that you do that, and it's also important that you have backups. I have a Rodecaster Pro, and so every time I'm recording, I have a little SD card in there, and I hold the record button, and I'm recording everything that I do, and it records all of the tracks. So that's just another thing you have to be able to do that, because inevitably when something's going to happen. Something's going to crash. I'm going to tell you a quick story here, because I know I'm running out of time, is that on Dealcasters, we were using Ecamm, and my computer just crashed. Everything just went dark. Probably I was 45 minutes into the interview, and everything crashed, and of course, I'm freaking out. And it reboots. I log right back into Ecamm, and when I opened up Ecamm, there was a button that said, "Do you want to restart the stream? Do you want to?" Or actually, I think it said, "Do you want to start where you left off?" And I hit it, and lo and behold, the stream started again. And there was Laura and Jim, and everything was all set. Everything was recorded. There was no anything. It was like and it happened. That was the one time that my computer crashed. So you're going to have to, find some software that you trust and be able to do that and have some backups. All right. So I know I'm running out of time. I don't want to hog it. Neil is rocking, and I've got a few slides to go. But make sure that you do a pre-flight check, okay? We did it on today's show. Arrive 15 minutes early, give somebody a checklist. You never know, even if somebody's at a high level, like, they're making 7 figures and they're some CEO of a company. Don't take for granted that they have they know what they're doing. They probably have people doing it for them and they don't know. And so you have to assume that you give them a checklist. Like, here's what you can expect. Here's how you center yourself on screen. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's what you select for sound. And then when you arrive, check their sound levels. Make sure they have the right mic selected. Make sure that everything sounds good on your end. Don't be afraid to tell them, "Hey, can you scratch the top of your mic? I want to make sure that mic is the one that's set." All of those things, check to make sure that you're doing everything. You're recording individual tracks. And that is going to make your audio that you're using for repurposing even better, which is a huge deal. And for the love of God, do not select a free podcast host. There's a couple of them out there. And I recommended Captivate. It's in the tech stack for the link here that you can click there. But you always want to be a customer, and you always don't want someone to be able to take your content and run ads on it that you don't have approval over. That's all I'm going to say about that, but make sure that you get a paid podcast host. So now you know more than 90% of content creators. The next step, and I just want to challenge everybody here because and I'm sorry I'm motor mouthing through the last few slides. This is a lot of information, and I get stuck doing this a lot too. I see stuff and I'm like, oh, I got to do that. 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 Just pick one thing from today. Just pick one thing. If it means finding yourself a smaller room, if it means grabbing some, your bean bag that's been sitting in the corner for 3 years, and treating your sound, if it means any of that kind of stuff, maybe investing in an external microphone. I don't know why that's doing that right now, but we're going to close that out. If it means any of that stuff, try recording with headphones, any of that kind of stuff. Just make these small changes, and we hope that it will, make dramatic results in your audio authority. And if you want to connect with me, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I am at castahead.net. And of course, if you did not get that link, it's castahead.net/CLP. And you can get all that free stuff. And hopefully you can transform your voice into your most powerful business asset. Sorry for going over time, guys. I'm done.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
That's me just checking I'm not on mute there. So that... but I do have an SM7B, and it is connected to a Focusrite. And I did have to go and get...
Oh, that's a great one. The Firecracker.
Obviously just influenced totally and utterly by the packaging on the... as opposed to knowing how good it was. Oh, that looks quite cool. I think I'll get that one.
It does look cool.
But I don't think they would have heard me otherwise. And I will also...
Yeah, there's affordable ones. I did a recent one called it's an Oshkosh as well. I compared it to the CL1. It sounds almost exactly like it, and it's $40. So wow. There's great options for gain lifters for sure.
And also for audio interface, I'm on the Zoom PodTrack P4 right now, so it's also very travel friendly as well.
Yes.
It has a USB mix minus as well, so it's pretty good. And you have like 4 XLR. There's also like a Bluetooth attachment if you want to use your iPhone for Bluetooth music and whatnot, or bring in guests via Bluetooth. So it's pretty good, powerhouse, and it has sound effects.
Yeah, and an SD card, so you can record backups as well. That's a fantastic one.
Yeah, I love the sound of that. And we do have a couple of comments. Before I'm just going to go around, I'm going to spend all my life scratching microphones now. I think that's what I've picked up as my
It's
top
better
tip.
than tapping. For some reason, I feel like it's a little more ASMR if you're doing this as opposed to yeah.
So there's a couple of questions in there. So I'm just going to bring up a couple of questions. He says, reeling back the millions of questions. But let's add this one to the broadcast. A question from Johan. He has trouble leveling up all his guests when he's got a multi-guest show.
Yeah.
What are your tips on that, Chris? Because, for instance, today, the way I'm running this, I have no control over the audio for individuals. It's an all or nothing gig for me.
Yeah, there's not an exact science to it, because you're bringing in people remotely through a piece of software, in this case, Ecamm. So the best way to do this is you got to really kind of eyeball it and earball it is basically what I do. So like I do this every day, multiple times a day, so I can tell when someone's too hot. And I can tell, and so I use, when I do sound checks, I'll use cans that are better for monitoring. And so when I do that, then I can really hone in and listen, and I'll get people talking before in a sound check, and I can tell when someone's too hot. So I'll ask them to dial something back locally. That's the only way to do it. You can't, I can't really, you can visually look at that meter. So in this case, Ecamm, but other pieces of software have that as well. I don't know how accurate those meters are, to be honest, that show the loudness, the LUFs for everybody coming in. Unfortunately, there's not really a way for you to kind of level it and have it work properly. I've tested out a bunch of stuff. It's really, you just got to listen in and go, this person's way too loud, and then just not be afraid to go, hey, Fulgens, it sounds like you're a little hot. Can you dial back your gain a little bit? And just do a little sound check and just get them sort of in line. Go back and listen to a stream and go, okay, this person was too loud. And if that's a regular guest, like Jim and I, who do Dealcasters, we do this. Like if Jim has tested out other mics, or I've tested out other mics, we'll get together and, sort of monitor it. If you have a Rodecaster Pro, you can see the levels that come in from in and out, but those are everyone combined, right? So the individuals you're going to have to work with and kind of say, hey, Jill, you're a little bit hot, or can you bring up the gain, right? Most of the time, I'm telling people that they have to bring up their gain. But I would never suggest that you'd have 3 other people lower their gain to be commensurate with someone else who's not high enough. I would always suggest to have someone bring up their gain to match everyone else. I hope that answers your question. There's not really a perfect answer.
Yeah, I think that just reminds me of being in a band or something where you
Right.
can't tell anybody, right? Could you turn the bass down a bit? No, you have to get everyone else to turn them up a bit
That's
to match.
exactly it.
No chance.
Yeah, there's no chance of doing that. So you must have some microphone stories as well, Fulgens. What's the worst guest that you've had, microphone-wise?
Yeah, I wouldn't say like worst guest, but for example, I host, remotely, these all-day seminars, and I'm bringing in like different panelists, and they come with different types of microphone setups and different audio levels, and and for example, yesterday I had a speaker come in, and I'm in my home studio, I'm on my SM7B and everything like that, but his audio is coming through, I guess, like his laptop or whatnot. And, as opposed to the attendees focusing on the presentation, they're saying, can he bring up his volume? And like, there's nothing I can do, So it's just one of those things. It could just be that one person with, and they're comparing my audio to their audio, but he doesn't have any control over it until he probably just like gets into a different audio setup. He can't like bring up the microphone volume. It's like it's as loud as it can get, So it could just be that one situation, and just that one guest or that one attendee who cannot focus on the presentation because they're just focusing on the audio.
I think it sort of goes back to a little bit what I was talking to is always remember too, is if we're going live like we are right now, and there happens to be an issue, you're recording everything. And I think a lot of people get too focused on the moment, the live moment. And it's great that we're all here live and there's tons of people in the chat and I appreciate all of this, is that, this stuff lives on forever. So we can take this video and we can, pull down the audio, fix those problems. And, that's why an audio podcast is so great. And, one thing to keep in mind too is that, the sound that you're hearing from me does include some room sound, and it's intentional, because if you sound like you're in an anechoic chamber, right? And you see me and I'm in a room, it's going to feel weird. Like, why is this guy's voice sound like so, like it feels like he's in the center of my head? It's weird when you see a person in a room talking, doing that. But on an audio podcast, that's what you want, because you are in the center of your head. It's more immersive. It's more intimate. You're out on a run. You're on your commute. You could be anywhere. So you want to be as mono and solid in that person's head, because it's for that. But on video, you need to be a little more forgiving. You need to have a little more room noise, because that's what it looks like. It looks and sounds natural together.
I think that's the perfect answer, and I will move us on, because we still got Neil, who's going to jog
the
through
real
his
superhero
slides as well. Well, actually, we've got a couple of other superheroes coming up next time round. We have Katie from
Nice.
Ecamm
Love it.
and Lux, as opposed to Lex Luthor, from Streamer
That is
Live. We're going to
awesome.
be joining
That
us
is awesome.
in a month's time. So we're keeping the
Outstanding.
superhero theme going. So
Bravo.
they're going to be joining us in a month's time. But next up, we have got Neil. So Neil is going to be asking, what kind of camera do you currently use? And we will have the options 1 to 5, and you can type in 1 to 5 within the Zoom chat. But same as we did for Chris, really. I guess we ought to say what cameras we're using, and perhaps in Fulgen's case, what he usually uses. So I'm using a ZV-E10. That's my camera. Fulgen's.
I usually use on my home studio, I use the Sony A7 III with a Sony 2470 G Master. Right now I'm on the road. I am on the Sony A6600 with the Sigma 16 lens.
I love how Fulgens outdid me with his road camera. That's just, you go on the road and somebody's bringing like a Logitech C920. He's like, brother, he's 6600. Man, I'm currently using a Sony A6100 with a Sigma lens.
And I'm using a Sony A7 IV with a 35mm G Master f1.4 lens to get that blurry background. But it's not my road one. I'll normally take my iPhone, I think. But yeah, Fulgen's road system is amazing.
Thank you.
That would be my on the road
That would
camera.
be yours. Cool.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, folks.
Yeah, is it a webcam? Are you using an iPhone, a mirrorless DSLR, a mixture of all 1 to 3, or do you need to buy one? So I guess I am using. I guess I'm using a mixture. We'll talk about that in a second. That's interesting. So what is the results? Ooh, 4 maybe.
No, just nobody is now. After everything we've said, nobody's going to say, I'm using an internal webcam and an internal microphone. Because
Yeah, that's it.
Absolute suicide. So now, cameras, lights. Tell us a bit about that, Neil.
All right, coming up. Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you so much. So let's talk about lights and camera settings. And I want to just emphasize what Chris was talking about before. Audio is 80% of your video. So I'm glad and so happy that Chris went first, because, getting your audio right first is one of the main things. Today, I'm just going to talk about making do with whatever cameras you've got and trying to get the best out of your cameras with regards to the settings and so on. And we're going to talk a little bit about lighting and bits of other things. So we're going to talk about exposure. What is exposure? Why do you care about it? What does good exposure look like versus bad? color correction in camera, so getting your white balance set correct so you don't look like you're in some sort of crazy show where you're all orange or pink and things like that. And then just a little bit about posture, how you should be sitting, how you should be framed in front of your camera. And we'll talk about lights. So I'm going to rattle through some of this because we're at the top of the hour already. So one statistic that you should know about is that YouTube is now being watched more on TVs than it is on mobile devices and other things. And that sort of metric was surpassed later, I think early in 2024. So lots of people are basically watching your YouTube videos and things like that on the big screens. So why not try and get the best out of your camera settings and look like the best you possibly can if people are actually going to be watching you on those big TVs? And speaking of things that really don't look that great, let's take a look at a couple of examples of people that you may recognize who didn't really get it right in camera in this particular case. This is Conan O'Brien. He's a famous chat show host in the US, and apart from the amazing hair that he's got, this image doesn't look terribly good, as you can clearly see here. So basically he's in a room, he's basically looking up his nose, and it's not the best image in the world. So we could definitely improve something there with regards to his camera settings and exposure. Second guy coming up here looks like he's planning the demise of his next victim in serial killer mode, but effectively he's not looking too good either. He's got a ceiling light that's cascading down on his head. Again, he's not positioned particularly correctly. There's light shining on his face here. It looks pretty flat and dull, and we could do a lot there with his exposure. And finally, here is a typical use case of witness protection, or people who've basically got lights shining from the back and not effectively lighting their face properly, or even setting their camera exposure up. So we've got a few examples here of how things, don't look terribly well, and we'll talk about how to sort of get those set up in the first place. So let's talk about getting it right in camera. Chris has talked about recording podcasts and splitting up those audio tracks and then being able to maybe fix some of those in post. Obviously, if you're recording YouTube videos and doing stuff like that, there are things that you can change in post-production. You can change your white balance, you can correct some of the exposure and things. But if we're talking about live streaming, getting on a job interview, attending your Zoom webinar, showing up for work, let's try and get those settings right in camera so we don't have to worry about anything in post-production. Let's look at some exposure examples to give you an idea of what good and bad exposure is. On the left-hand side here, we see that the image here is underexposed. And what I mean by that is the image is quite dark. There's very little detail. It's quite flat looking. You can't really pick out what's going on in the picture at all. And on the right-hand side, we've got the opposite of that. We've got something that's completely overexposed. The term would be blown out. Highlights are blown out. They're sort of super bright. Again, you can't see the image very well. And in the middle, we've got exposure in our camera that's correctly exposed. You can see my little cat there looking at her Ecamm mugs. And obviously, we've got some depth of field going on and blurry background and stuff like that. So the whole image there looks a little bit more pleasing than the other two. Well, I hope you can notice the difference anyway. So what I mean by exposure is really controlled by three settings in your camera. Now, every camera on the market has these three settings: ISO, shutter speed, aperture, commonly known as the exposure triangle. Each one of these settings affects the overall exposure of your camera. And we're going to talk a little bit about what these actual settings are and how they reflect in your camera settings. The good news for us video people, because obviously if you're a photographer, you'll have to play around with shutter speed, but for video, shutter speed is really fixed depending on how you set up your camera. So we only have to really worry about ISO and aperture, and we'll talk a little bit about what those are right now. So how do I check my exposure? Well, depending on what camera you have, I'm just showing you the Sony camera settings because that's the one I use. But things like Canon, Fuji, and all other types of camera manufacturers will all have some form of metering. And that's where you can tell whether your image is overexposed or underexposed. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on how the camera's actually assessing the light and available light in your image and calculating this particular setting. And it should be really taken with a pinch of salt. It's just a rule where you can take a look at this and see what is good exposure with regards to how you have your camera set up. If the number on this particular meter is a plus number, it means generally that it's overexposed. If it's a minus number, as it is in this diagram, then it means it's slightly underexposed. What you're looking for is to get an image that's around 0. And that means that the overall image that the camera is receiving and taking a reading from is generally considered by the camera anyway as being correctly exposed. But there's no way a camera can work out that as well as you looking at your own image in your settings. So take a recording of your image and take a look at how that image looks to you before you do any live streaming or anything like that, because using your eyes is going to give you a lot more leeway in working out whether that image is well exposed or not. So just make sure that when you are looking at multimetering on your camera, then it's just taken with a grain of salt. Always use the reference image, which is what you're seeing yourself, as the real image. Now, when we look at webcams, such as OBSBot and other things, they don't really have an exposure meter specifically. So we'll go on to showing you how that gets set up in a second with the OBSBot side of things. But the OBSBots don't really have any of this metering, and there are other things that you can do for that. Let's talk about in our exposure triangle aperture. Now, aperture, if you think of the iris in your eye, the iris is the one that controls the amount of light coming into your eye via moving, making the pupil bigger and smaller. And in this particular case, aperture is basically the same as your iris. And you'll see on your camera that on certain lenses, depending if you've got a fixed lens or on the OBSBot cameras and other things, you'll have these numbers which are called f-stops, and f just stands for focal. And effectively, when you're looking at aperture on your camera, the smaller the number, the larger the aperture in your lens, which means it's going to let more light. And more light and a larger aperture is going to give you a more blurry background, a nicer depth of field as it's called. So you can see this diagram here. The first image has got a wider aperture, so it's f1.4, which means that you are more in focus and the background is slightly out of focus. It's blurry and giving you sort of a depth, separating you from the background. On the other side, f22 has a much smaller hole, a much smaller aperture, which lets in less light, which means that more things are going to be in focus. So depending on the look and feel that you're going for, and obviously what your lens is capable of, you can change the aperture value in your camera to let in more light or less light. In my particular case, as I mentioned before, I'm using a Sony lens which is set at f1.4, so I'm letting in tons of light, which means I don't need a ton of light in my studio, and it gives me a nice blurry background. So when we talk about aperture, just think of it as the iris in your eye. The bigger the number, the smaller the aperture, and the smaller the number, the larger the amount of light being let into your lens. Now, most lenses have a aperture ring around them, or on your Sony camera, you'll have one of the dials in the actual camera that will control the aperture setting. And what does that look like on the Sony camera? Well, just here, if you see something that says f1.8, 3.5, 4, that is the aperture value. And turning and changing those dials either with the actual ring or on the camera itself is going to affect that particular aperture value. Now, what about the OBSBot cameras? Well, a lot of the OBSBot cameras have a fixed aperture lens, which means that you can't adjust it. Now, for illustration, I've shown you here the Meet 2, the Tiny Light, and the Tail Air. In fact, one of these cameras has the aperture value of f1.9, but for illustration, I've just fixed them all at f1.8. So you can't change the aperture value on these cameras. You can do some fancy things in software, which I'll show you a little bit later. The only camera that OBSBot do at the moment that has a variable aperture is the flagship one, which is the Tail 2, and that's because it has an optical zoom. So as that zoom is changing, then the aperture is also going to change as well. Some expensive lenses that you can put in front of your Sony cameras are something called a fixed aperture, which means the aperture value doesn't change if you zoom in and out. But in this particular case, on the Tail 2, then the aperture value is going to change. And if the aperture value changes, then the exposure, i.e. the light and dark of your image is also going to change as you zoom in and out. So just something to be aware of if you're using one of those cameras. Next up is ISO. And ISO is really basically associated with the gain control of your camera. And it's basically how it determines how sensitive the camera sensor is to light. Just think of it as a volume control. We were talking earlier, Chris was mentioning about gain and noise and distortion and things like that. The same thing applies if you turn up your ISO too much. You're going to get a grainy image. So you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got an image that's basically got a high ISO value. And the ISO value in this particular case, I think, was at 6400, which means that it's going to be very sensitive to any available light. Doesn't mean now that you need a ton of light, but with that, if you turn that value up, you're going to get more grain in your image. On the right-hand side, we've got a low ISO value of 100. The image is clean, there's no noise in the image, and basically it's a balance between how much light you have and how you can get good exposure in your camera. So there's no right and wrong settings for this. It totally depends on your studio environment, where you are, and if you're on the road like Fulgence is, then obviously his settings in his camera are going to change based on where he is today versus when he's in his studio. Where is that setting on the Sony camera? Well, it's right here. It says ISO, and basically there's a wheel again in your Sony camera to change that ISO value. And depending on what camera you have, some cameras start at ISO 50 and they go all the way up to 128,000. So it all depends on the camera that you have. The Obsbot cameras have these ISO ranges as well, and others. So again, it's just a matter of tweaking it and changing those values to correct the exposure. But ISO, again, if you turn it up too much, you're going to get noise in your image, and that's not what you want to get a decent looking video image. The last thing in the triangle is shutter speed. And as I mentioned, the good news about videographers is that our shutter speed is typically fixed based on the camera and the settings that we have. And shutter speed, for those who don't know, is basically how quickly the camera's shutter opens and closes. In photography speak, if you want to take something that's very, very fast moving, like a car or an animal or something like that, then you would typically have a very, very high shutter speed. On the left-hand side here, this is 1/3000th of a second, which means it opens and closes extremely quickly, freezing that motion so you can capture something that's moving very fast. On the opposite side, you'll see here the cat that's very, very blurry. We have an shutter speed of 30 seconds, which means it opens for 30 seconds and then closes, which means anything that's moving past that is going to have these motion trails, these blur, and so on. But for video, we just basically have to adhere to this thing called the 180-degree rule. And all that means is, depending what frame rate we set in our camera, what streaming rate we want to set to, we just basically set our shutter speed to that. So to give you some examples, typical Zoom calls that we're on right now are typically at 30 frames per second. So if we're running our Zoom calls or live streams and things like that, most people stream at around 30 frames per second. You just have to set your shutter speed to 1/60. Always double the frame rate that you're setting to. So it's 30 frames per second, it's 1/60. Cinematic movies are all shot at 24 frames per second. That's just from history and how it was all set up originally. We don't typically have a shutter speed of 1/48 in our cameras. They're typically down to 1/50, so that's typically what we set it to. And if you want to go QVC style and things like that, and home shopping, and if you're doing gaming, then we see people set their frame rates and streaming at 60 frames per second, and that would be a shutter speed of 1/120. Again, you can tweak and change these around. It depends on the type of motion blur, how smooth you want your image to look, how blurry you want your image to look when we're moving around. You know, I move my hands a lot, so obviously it depends on how that's set up and whether you get the motion blur or not. But if you're looking at setting up your system for live streaming, LinkedIn Lives, Zoom and things like that, I'd go for 30 frames per second at 1/60 with your shutter speed. Where is that on the Sony stuff? Well, it's right here. You'll see this 1/50 and so on. And where is your frame rates? The frame rates is here on the Sony cameras. You'll see something that says something like 24p in this particular case, but depending on how you set up your camera will determine basically how that is all set up. Last thing is, from an exposure perspective, in terms of how your image looks, is all about color temperature, and that's something called white balance. White balance is basically that. It's how your camera is interpreting the light and basically casting and setting up what color temperature is going to match what available light you've got. You'll see these settings in the cameras by these little icons. You'll see a sunshine for daylight, which is typically measured in, old color temperature is measured in something called kelvins, and the daylight setting that you would normally see on lights that you buy and other camera settings is 5500. That's what my lights are set to right now on my camera. But obviously, if it's at dusk or in the evening, you get this sort of blue hour, and that's a different color temperature altogether. And then obviously if it's shady, you'll get this other variant of the color temperature. So for video work and things like that, if you're working in a studio, I would typically set my camera to 5500 kelvins and make sure that the lights that you buy are obviously daylight set lights. And we do have a kit list that I can show you in the link later, where we've got some examples of affordable lights that you can get for your camera that are sort of set to that daylight temperature. Sony white balance is set here. You can set auto white balance to start with, but I would always recommend, if you're trying to set white balance, you could always use something called a gray card. That you can buy these on Amazon, and there is a way on the Sony cameras, not the OBSBot or the other webcams, that you can actually set a manual white balance, and all that's going to do is take a reading of this gray card, match it with the lights that you've got available to you, and that will help you get natural looking skin tones and set your camera up more than you would typically do by just selecting auto white balance. So I'm just going to show you real quick 2 things that you can change here and how those get affected with the OBSBot camera. I've got cameras all around me. It's getting confusing. So the OBSBot Tiny 2 light is here. And I just wanted to show you in the OBSBot center that I've got my shutter speed at the moment set to 1/60 because I'm at 30 frames per second. If I start to wind that down or wind that up and change my shutter speed to like 1/400, you can see that my exposure, because I'm not changing anything else right now, is changing. So if I change one of these things in the triangle, I've got to compensate by changing something else. So if I've just set my shutter speed to something ridiculous, like 1/320, then I have to bump up my ISO to compensate for that exposure. And as I'm bumping up the ISO, the image is getting a little bit more grainy because I'm at ISO 4000 now, and I could go even crazier and so on. So remember that the exposure triangle is a relationship between these 3 settings. As I've mentioned, the aperture is fixed in the OBSBot cameras. So in that particular case, I only have to play with my shutter speed, which I'll go back down to 1/60, and then I'll just turn my ISO down so it's a little bit less crazy bright. So that's the shutter speed and ISO. Down here on the OBSBot, you can set white balance automatically if you want. I find that it sort of doesn't guess the white balance typically very well, so you can change that by this temperature slider. If you go over to the left, it's blue. That's typical blue hour, what you would see in in the morning or in sort of late in the evenings. And if you go to the full right, you could go orange. And we're not going to mention orange people at the moment. So if I go down here to 5500, I've set my lights to that temperature, set the camera to that temperature, and so on. So that's the OBSBot center. But there is another piece of software that I recommend and we use quite a lot for changing those settings, and that's Camo Studio from Reincubate. I'm just going to push a link out there if you want to get Camo. Now this version is free, and you can basically do all the same settings that you can do in the OBSBot center with Camo Studio, but a whole lot more. So you can tweak things like the background, you can make the background a little bit blurry, you can turn on spotlight mode, you can change the blur of your image to give you a little bit of subtle blurring and things like that. You can even change the white balance, you can adjust the brightness, you can do all those things, and I thoroughly recommend Camo Studio for people who are trying to get a good image from the camera, because Camo Studio works with any webcam, even works with your iPhone. I'm going to switch it over to my iPhone here. There's my iPhone. So I'm using my old iPhone 13, and I can play around with this image and get it to look as decent as I can. So you don't have to spend a ton of money on getting a decent image on your camera. As I said, I'm just using my old iPhone, but with a great piece of software like Camo, you can really dial in the settings, get exactly everything how you want it to look, and you can make it look marvelous. So that basically is shutter speed, exposure in like 100 miles an hour. Let's now talk a little bit very quickly about posture and how you should be framing yourself. We've got a handy dandy little what is it called? Not the lower third, an overlay that will help you frame yourself in the image. As you can see, Martin created this. I can put my eyes directly in the center, and it's adhering to this thing called the rule of thirds, which is just basically splitting up the image into thirds so you can get your framing absolutely right. I've used to send this overlay out to people who are joining me on Zoom calls so they can get themselves set up, especially if you've got customers that are doing podcasts and they want to get their users set up correctly and making sure that everybody's in the nice frame. And as Fulgin says, yes, it's a posture grid. That's basically what it's called. So yeah, we've got that available. I'll put that link in the description and send that out in the chat in a second. So that is posture and exposure. Let's quickly talk about lighting. And for this, I'm just going to do a very quick demo. I'm going to switch off my lighting. And we're going to talk about the 3-point lighting example. So I'm going to switch off my 2 main lights. It's witness protection time. You can still hear me, but you can't see me. The first light that I'm going to turn on is the key light. And this light, in my particular case, is this one here. And it's this guy over here. And we've got some examples that we can send you regarding what types of lighting, but this is a softbox. It's got a grid or a crate on it, which basically just stops the light spilling out everywhere else, and it's a little bit more concentrated. And really, when you're setting up your lighting, you only really need 2 lights. The key light here is the one on the left. Now, if I flip over to the next light, this would be the fill light, which in my case is an Elgato panel light, which is this one here. And both lights, as you can see in this image, are just basically 45 degrees, quite high up. And that's how I've got them set up. One, to minimize reflections, but also to give a more pleasing look. You can change and dial in these settings depending on the type of shadows that you want on your face. Depends if you want a more depth look or a flat look. It all depends on what you're looking for with regards to lighting. I also have practical lights in my studio. These are the ones behind me, which are cascading these different tones. I've got obviously an orange tone on one side and a purple tone on another. And you can have as many practical lights as you want. People sometimes that have a hair light behind them, which gives a nice sort of glow behind them, which helps them separate from the background. There's all different types of lighting techniques that you can set up. But the 2 main ones I would recommend is obviously the key light and the fill light. And I think I only have one more slide, which is one for reducing reflections. So I would recommend that for me, because I wear glasses, if I look up, you can see the reflections in my glasses already. So I've got my lights as high as I possibly can in this small soundproof room that I'm using at the moment. And effectively, if you can get the lights as high as possible, then that's going to help minimize any reflections. It might always be possible depending how you set everything up, but in my case, I've tried to make them as high as possible, and so I can focus on the prompter and not really get too many reflections in my eyes. And I think that's it. So Martin, over to you. Back to questions. Done that in as quickly as possible.
So thank you, Scott, who said that was a camera masterclass. So
I can't hear Martin.
Martin's a mute.
Oh, Martin's a mute.
Yeah, I'm on mute because I didn't want to disturb you during and look unprofessional. So yeah, Scott was saying that was a camera masterclass in capital letters, Neil. So yeah, that.
Thank you so much.
It was a masterclass, and I can tell the story of me getting an Osbot tiny camera delivered and taking out the box and sticking it on a boom arm, so it swung out nicely. And I thought, oh. And then I looked at it and thought, yeah, the picture quality is really poor. So I was able to call up Neil, who said, no, these are the things you need to set. Turn the auto off and do these tweaks, and suddenly, actually, you know what? You get a really decent picture from a camera the size of a matchbox these days. So
crazy.
Yeah, it's, microphones and cameras both have gone to a very, very affordable level for a reasonable quality of sound. But if you want to go that step further, then we've given you just about every piece of advice you could possibly want there. And at this point in time, I have to confess, Chris, I've never actually been on an audio-only podcast. Only ever done video stuff. Never. I sort of seem to skip that totally. I'm not quite sure how. Neil, Fulgence, time to confess? Have you been on an audio-only podcast?
I mean, I've repurposed
Can't
some
say
of
that,
my
huh?
older material as an audio podcast. I sometimes, when I'm on Substack, I'll create an audio version of the Substack post. So technically, that is an audio. But as a guest, no, I haven't. Maybe it's time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird too because you're on an audio only podcast sometimes, and you're recording in a video program. So it's sort of like, why are we not recording video, and why is this only being used for? And so typically I'll tell people like, hey, turn on your cameras, right? At least you can use video if it's you don't have to put out a video podcast if you feel uncomfortable or whatever. But yeah, it's I've done a handful of those already this year where it's just audio only. But we can see each other on the video. We're interacting with each other. I'm just used to, doing both at the same time, and you might as well. I've got a question, if I may. I don't want to jump in front of anyone who's in the chat, but obviously, what you've got, like I've got an Insta360 link. I also use Camo, and all of these webcams are great for you being able to see yourself and make adjustments. Like let me turn this down, let me turn this up, and let me get this match a certain thing. It's great for that. But obviously we have these mirrorless cameras. We've got the in my case the A6100, and you showed all the settings for the Sony camera. How do you guys do it in terms of like, because you don't have a remote, you can't do that, and watch yourself at the same time, and I found myself like, how am I going to get my f-stop, how am I going to I'm reaching behind it, and I'm like trying to find the dial, but then I have to get back into position. Like what does that look like for you guys to be able to dial in that physically on those dials for Sony, maybe specifically, or any camera?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Fulgens.
I was gonna say, for me, like for my home studio, my camera is kind of like more than arm's length away. I literally get up, get behind the camera, and make tweaks. Sit back down, see how it looks. Get up, get back, and I just do that process. It takes time, and it's worth it. Right now, I'm fortunate. Right now, my in this studio setup here, I can actually like touch my camera and reach here, but you might have a camera further away. I say it's worth it. Get up, do the work, get behind the camera if if it's not arm's reach, and just like get in front of it and just take notes. Okay, I'm at 4100 Kelvin. Let me just go back there and bump it up to 42 and see what that looks like.
So same for me in answer to that question, but most new Sony cameras now are compatible with a remote camera app. So on your phone, you just connect it via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, and you can change all those settings that I've just shown you in that screenshot just from the luxury of your armchair. So you can just dial them all in, tweak them, away you go. Yeah, it's called a Monitor and Connect. I'll send you a link, Chris. Not every camera is compatible, as Martin and I testified to when we were trying to get his remote thing set up. But for the longest time, same as Fulgens, reaching behind the camera, recording. Basically, I would just record. I'd change the settings, and I'd say, okay, now I've changed it to f1.4, whatever kelvins, blah, 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 and then, tweak again. And then I go back and look at the recording and go, oh, those are the settings that I like. That's the one that I'm going to keep. So it's just a bit of trial and error, but it's so worth it. And with the Sony cameras, you can also save different profiles, different presets. So you've got, on most of the new cameras now, you've got 3 presets. So preset 1 would be 30 frames per second, preset 2 would be QVC, 60 frames a second, and then preset 1 would be cinema or whatever, 24. So there's lots of things you can do now. And same with the Osborne cameras, you can save presets and different lighting for those as well. So you really can just sort of tweak away. But yeah, it was trial and error for the longest time.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, following up from that, Jim is actually asking in the comments, do we really need DSLR cameras now when the PTZ cameras are so good?
Well, I mean, you've seen a lot of people switching from the Sony mirrorless cameras to maybe the Meet 2, just the Osborne Meet 2 or the Insta360. They're getting so good now that it's hard to sort of tell the difference between them, especially if you're using great software like Camo, where you can just tweak a little bit of the background and make it blurry. I'm not talking that zoom fake background where, somebody like me, my hair's like wild and crazy and goes, doesn't very key out very well. But things like that, definitely, I mean, they're getting close to that now. It all depends on the look that you're going for and your budget, but you can pick up a a Meet 2 for what, $70, and instantly transform the look and feel of your standard laptop camera. Just like Chris was saying about investing 50, 60 bucks on a decent camera with good mic technique and a sort of a room where it's a little bit treated will outperform anything that you buy that's crazy expensive and not use it right. It's all about your use case, I think.
And I just wanted to make a quick note, especially like if you're on the road like I am, and just to piggyback on like Neil's lighting techniques. So in this Airbnb, I had a light bulb right above my head, and it was creating like this shining effect on my forehead. And you can see like I have like this kitchen, which is like arm's reach. I could like just poke my finger on the refrigerator right here. But there were two lights back there as well. In creating reflection on the cabinets. I basically just unscrewed the bulbs. I unscrewed the bulb above my head, and I unscrewed the bulbs behind me. So if you have that type of control, go for it. And that'll like improve the lighting of your setup. I can't speak so much for hotels, but at least in Airbnbs, you can have some control over your lighting.
If you're in a rock band, you just trash the hotel room and you can do whatever you want, right? And then
There you go.
Exactly.
But that's it. But I wouldn't recommend that, though. But I think, to your point, you're absolutely right. If you can control your lighting, that's the main thing, and have complete control. Just like in audio, right? If you can control the sound in your room a little bit and dampen and soundproof that, and I'm fortunate to be able to do a little bit of both because I've no windows in here. I'm banished to the dungeon, a bit like yourself, Fulgens. But I think it's good if you can actually control both the lighting and the audio environment.
Okay, guys. That was a masterclass from both of you. I think we're going to have to do a little bit of a recap because we're already just hitting time. And thank you for everyone who's joined us in the chat there, including Saeed, who's just joined 1 minute. I mean, 1.5 hours late. You just can't get the audience quality these days, can you?
What's up, Saeed?
Thanks for joining in spirit, Saeed. That's the main thing.
Yeah. So we're going to close up with a couple of calls to action. So Chris, Neil is sitting there ready to press some buttons. Tell us again what people can get in terms of free resources from you.
Yeah, if you go to castahead.net/CLP, I've got my entire tech stack from the software that I use to record everything that I do, as well as a lot of the hardware that we spoke about and a lot of the gear that we spoke about earlier, and then as well as my repurposing workflow, a lot of the planning that goes into content that you can use afterwards that you can do before you even set and hit the record button. And that's at castahead.net/CLP. And of course, I'm at castahead.net. If you're someone that you want to have someone do all of the stuff for you, you don't want to know how the sausage is made, you just want someone to do it for you, I'm at castahead.net. I'm on LinkedIn. That's usually where I'm the most responsive. And also MySpace. Right, Neil? Neil, whatever happened to you, Neil? You were. I was on a show with you, and you said in the year 2025, MySpace was going to be the social media thing that you were going to focus on. You don't remember that?
I do. MySpace GPT is coming soon. Let's
go.
Let's
Yes.
redo it. Oh, I love MySpace. I love it. I do remember that.
As we continue to amuse ourselves with Neil looking angry on this particular image and me arriving.
Never seen him look angry, I don't think.
Yeah, I've just told him that Fulgen's taking his job. That's it.
Oh.
But what you didn't see me is run off and then jump in the pool in delight. It's like, yeah, it's fine.
Well played.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love
For
it.
people watching, Neil and I have something called Go Live Now Academy, and that's our website there. Please feel free to visit the website, take a look around. You'll find various different courses on things like going live on LinkedIn, and also a selection of workshops that we are putting together. And we're kind of doing a poll at the moment. It's a straw poll, and so we want you to go and have a look around. And if there's any workshops that you're interested in, then do put your name down. You're not committing to anything at the moment, but we're just asking you to say which workshops do you want. So is it things like green screen? Is it eCam builds? Is it presentations? Is it roadcasters and everything associated with stream decks? What do you want to see? We've got a bunch of workshops set up, and they look something like this. So we're back to the sort of normal visions. So I'm thinking of doing an eCam design workshop. All of the stuff we're looking at today is eCam design, and maybe at some point we might even bring in someone else to work with me.
Who's
to
that
be
handsome
discussed.
devil?
Magically
discussed.
appears.
I know.
Directly after
Magic.
this particular show. So thank you for joining me, everybody. We're going to play out in a second or two. And thank you for everybody who's been in the chat today. And just to finish off, I thought what we needed to do, being as everybody else has had some sort of superhero type vibe going on. And thanks to Des and John and everybody else. Davidson's all natural Jim, who lives in hotels all the time apparently. So all those lucky people in the chat, thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. But before we go, I just wanted to give Fulgens his own
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
superhero.
I was feeling left out.
Look at
You
I was
Fears,
feeling left
too.
out.
You are, yeah. I'm going to send you a copy afterwards.
FOMO no more. Awesome.
Those are
More
great.
superheroes to come next time on the 12th of September, everybody. But thank you, Chris, and thank you, Neil, and thank you, Fulgens,
Thank
and
you,
everyone
guys.
else for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
And we're just going to run to a close, and I'll see you in the green room. I'm not going to run the whole video, but we'll start it.